The kitchen light was always the last one on, even at 2 in the morning, even in January when the heating bill made my grandfather go quiet at the dinner table. Her name was Edna May Holloway, 71 years old, 5 feet 2, hands that had seen 40 winters of hard work and never once asked for help. And on the counter, always on the counter, was a brown ledger book, water-stained on the corner, held shut with a rubber band that had lost most of its stretch. Nobody touched that book, not the kids, not her husband, not even the pastor who came for Sunday supper. One evening I asked her what was inside it. She looked at me over her reading glasses, set down her pen, and said very quietly, "Everything they don't want you to know." I was 12 years old. I didn't understand. But 30 years later, when inflation swallowed my savings account whole and I couldn't figure out why, I finally went looking for that book. And what I found inside it changed every single thing I believed about money. 30 rules, handwritten, some in pencil, some in blue ink, some with little stars drawn next to them like she already knew which ones mattered most. But what happened next, no one.
Rule 1. The cash-only negotiation rule. The butcher on Maple Street knew Edna May by name. Not because she came in often, because when she did, she always had cash, folded, exact, laid flat on the counter like a quiet statement. One afternoon she bought a roast priced at $4.80. She put $4 down and looked at him. Just looked. He wrapped it without a word. Cash has a voice, she told me later. Credit whispers. Cash speaks out loud. In 2026, we swipe without thinking. We never negotiate, and merchants know it. Edna May never forgot that a dollar you can touch is a dollar with power.
Rule 2. Avoiding the convenience tax. There was a little corner store 2 blocks from the house. Open late, bright lights, easy. Edna May walked past it every single day for 30 years and almost never went in. Once I asked her why. She pointed at the price tag on a can of soup. "You're paying for their lights and their hours," she said, "not the soup." That quiet difference, the convenience markup, bled families dry, and nobody named it. In 2026, we call it delivery fees, surge pricing, and premium memberships. She called it what it was, a tax on laziness. She refused to pay it. Rule 3. The 30-day cooling-off period for big purchases. The sewing machine sat in the catalog for 31 days before Edna May bought it. I know because she told me she circled the date she first saw it and wrote a single word beneath it, wait. Her daughter thought she'd forgotten. Her husband assumed she'd changed her mind. She hadn't. She was watching herself, waiting to see if she still wanted it when the wanting got quiet. Desire is loudest the first week, she said. Truth comes in the second month. Today, we one-click buy before we finish the thought. She made desire prove itself first. Almost half the time, it couldn't. Rule 4. Never borrow for a depreciating asset. Her neighbor bought a brand-new Oldsmobile in 1963 on a payment plan. Edna May stood on the porch and watched it pull into the driveway. She didn't say a word. 3 years later, that neighbor was still paying. The car needed new brakes. The payment hadn't changed. Edna May's husband asked if she ever wished they'd done the same. She looked at him like he'd asked something strange. You don't borrow money for something that's already losing value while you sign the paper. Simple, ruthless, true. In 2026, American households carry billions in auto loans on cars worth less every single month. She saw this coming in 1963. Behind the flour canister. That's where it was. A folded $20 bill, pressed flat, replaced every time it got used. Nobody knew about it, not even her husband. That bothered me once. I asked her if that was fair. She was quiet for a moment. "It's not about him," she said. "It's about the moment when everything goes wrong at once and there's nothing left." She'd lived through one of those moments before. The hidden bill was never for spending, it was for surviving. In 2026, financial advisors call it an emergency fund. Edna May called it the bill nobody can take. She kept it in flour because nobody looks there when they're desperate. The woman down the street could cut hair. Edna May could preserve vegetables and sew buttonholes that never came loose. For 11 years, neither of them paid for what the other provided. There was no contract, no invoice, just a quiet understanding between two women who knew that skill has value outside of dollar signs. One winter, the furnace needed a look. The mechanic across the alley got 3 jars of pickled tomatoes and a mended coat. He never sent a bill. In 2026, we pay for everything in currency. Edna May understood that currency is just one language. Skill is another, and sometimes it speaks louder. Every Thursday. Not Sunday, Thursday. No purchases, no errands with a wallet involved. The day simply passed without money changing hands. Her children thought it was a religious thing. It wasn't. One day of no spending every week means 52 days a year you didn't drain yourself, she told me. That adds up to a month and a half of your life returned. I did the math. She was right. In 2026, there's always a sale ending tonight, an offer expiring at midnight. Edna May built a wall 1 day a week. Behind that wall, the noise couldn't reach her, and in the quiet, she kept more than she spent. Every time she deposited money into her savings envelope, yes, an envelope, she added 10 cents for every dollar. Her own hand, her own pen, interest she paid to herself. It made no logical sense to anyone who heard it. Her son laughed once. She let him laugh. If the bank can reward me for holding money, I can reward myself for earning it. The psychological effect was real. Watching her own savings grow, even by a fiction she created, made her protect that envelope like it was alive. In 2026, high-yield accounts do this automatically, but Edna May did it by hand, and she felt every penny. There was one magazine. One. It came on the first Tuesday of every month and cost 40 cents a year. She read every page. When the price went to 60 cents, she wrote a letter to cancel it. Her granddaughter thought she was being difficult, but Edna May held up the cancellation notice and said, "Every recurring cost you don't control controls you instead." In 2026, the average American pays for 11 subscriptions and can only name 4 of them. Edna May allowed nothing to pull money from her without her full, current, deliberate permission, not even 40 cents. Especially not 40 cents. The toaster made a terrible sound one morning. Her husband reached for his coat and said he'd stop by the hardware store. Edna May told him to sit back down. She spent 48 hours with that toaster. A screwdriver, a piece of aluminum foil she'd saved, something she'd read in a pamphlet 3 years ago. On the second afternoon, it worked again. It worked for 9 more years.
Everything deserves 48 hours before it becomes trash, she said. In 2026, we replace before we repair. Manufacturers count on it. Edna May never gave them the satisfaction. She believed broken things were just things waiting to be understood. She owned 3 pairs of shoes. 3. One for work, one for church, one for weather. Each pair lasted a decade because she bought leather, not fashion. Her daughter once came home with a pair of bright white sneakers that were on sale. Edna May looked at them and asked one question: what happens when that color goes? The daughter didn't have an answer. Price and cost are different things, Edna May said. Price is what you pay once. Cost is what you pay forever. In 2026, fast fashion sells trends that expire in a season. She bought things that had no expiration date and paid far less in the long run.
Every purchase in that brown ledger got rounded up to the nearest dollar. A 12-cent stamp became 13. A 91-cent can became $1. The rounding lived in a separate column on the right side of the page. By December, that column had quietly grown into something real. Once it reached $40, once $62. She never spent it on anything ordinary. What you don't notice leaving, you won't miss, she said, but it's still yours. In 2026, there are apps that do this automatically. Edna May did it with a stubby pencil at the kitchen table every evening before bed. It was the most peaceful part of her day. She never left for the grocery store without opening every cabinet first, every one. She'd stand in the kitchen with a small notepad and move her lips quietly, counting. One afternoon, her neighbor called to ask if she wanted a ride to the A&P. Edna May said she'd be ready in 20 minutes. Her neighbor assumed she was getting dressed. She was actually doing inventory. She bought what was missing, only what was missing. In 2026, we walk into stores hungry and distracted and leave with things we already had at home. Edna May walked in with a list that was a photograph of her actual life. She never bought the same thing twice in 1 week. The bread came out every Saturday morning. The whole house smelled different on Saturdays, warmer somehow, like the walls themselves relaxed. It wasn't just bread. Jam, soup stock, cleaning paste, hand lotion, things that other families paid for in jars and boxes, Edna May made at the kitchen counter. Her son once calculated what she saved in a year. He came to the table with a number, and she waved it away. "It's not just the money," she said. "It's knowing exactly what's in everything you touch." In 2026, that knowledge about ingredients, about process, has become a luxury. She never let it become one. The armchair in the living room came from an estate sale in 1958. It was there until 1991. By then, it had been reupholstered twice, had a leg replaced once, and had held every grandchild during a fever or a nightmare. Nobody ever asked where Edna May bought it. It just belonged. New means someone else already paid the highest price, she said. Used means you paid what it's actually worth. In 2026, vintage is fashionable, but Edna May wasn't doing it for fashion. She was doing it because the math was simple and the quality was better, and because she knew the difference between status and value. She made quilts, always had. But somewhere around 1965, someone asked to buy one. She hesitated. Quilting was hers, something private and slow and not for sale. She thought about it for 2 weeks. Then she made a separate pile, one for the family, one for the world. The two piles never confused each other. The income from quilts paid for 3 Christmas mornings that would have otherwise been lean. She never let the money change why she made them, only what the making gave her. In 2026, we call it a side hustle. She called it being useful on both sides of the door, and she guarded the joy of it fiercely. When a new pot came into that kitchen, an old one left. When a new dress hung in the closet, something else was folded into a bag for the church drive. Nobody taught her this. She arrived at it on her own, sometime in the late 1950s, when she noticed the house was getting heavy, full of things that had nowhere to be useful. A house can only breathe if you let things go, she said. In 2026, we have storage units, entire buildings rented to hold the overflow of lives that forgot to let go. Edna May never needed one. Her home could breathe, and so, somehow, could everyone inside it. When her youngest son turned 16, she did something that confused everyone. Instead of buying him something to wear or drive, she paid for a 2-week mechanics course at the community center. He was embarrassed. His friends got things. He got grease under his fingernails. 3 years later, he was the only person in the neighborhood who could fix his own car. He never paid a mechanic again. In 2026, we spend freely on image and carefully on education, when it should be the opposite. Edna May saw status as something borrowed. She saw knowledge as something owned, and nobody can repossess what lives inside a person's hands. The backyard was not a garden for beauty. 3 rows of tomatoes, 2 of green beans, a corner of onions that seemed to grow whether or not anyone paid attention. One summer, the grocery prices jumped after a bad harvest somewhere south. Edna May barely noticed. Her family ate from the yard for 6 weeks without a single special trip to the store. Her neighbor asked how she managed. She pointed at the dirt. "This is a savings account that grows upward," she said. In 2026, food prices are at historic highs, and most families have no fallback. She grew one, quietly, year after year, right outside the kitchen window. The year her husband got a raise, something strange happened. Nothing changed. Not the groceries, not the Sunday drives, not the Christmas budget. Everything stayed exactly as it was. Her sister thought it was strange. "Aren't you going to treat yourselves?" Edna May smiled and said, "We're treating our future selves." She took the raise and routed it somewhere the family couldn't spend it impulsively. Every time income grew, spending stayed flat. The distance between those two numbers became their security. In 2026, most raises are absorbed by new habits within 3 months. Edna May let hers accumulate, silently, invisibly, year after quiet year.
Avoiding lifestyle creep. The year her husband got a raise, something strange happened. Nothing changed. Not the groceries, not the Sunday drives, not the Christmas budget. Everything stayed exactly as it was. Her sister thought it was strange. "Aren't you going to treat yourselves?" Edna May smiled and said, "We're treating our future selves." She took the raise and routed it somewhere the family couldn't spend it impulsively. Every time income grew, spending stayed flat. The distance between those two numbers became their security. In 2026, most raises are absorbed by new habits within 3 months. Edna May let hers accumulate. Silently, invisibly, year after quiet year.
4 families, 1 large order from the supplier outside of town, split 4 ways, every month. No one family could afford the 50-pound sack of flour, the case of canned goods, the quantity that unlocked the real price. but 4 families could. So they did. Quietly, without any fanfare. They called it the Thursday Share. Nobody outside those 4 households knew it existed. In 2026, buying clubs and co-ops have made a comeback. But Edna May didn't need an app to organize it. She needed 3 neighbors she trusted. That, she said, was always the harder part and the more important one.